Hey everybody, it is Mike, 55 years young. Let's talk about salt, sodium, eating too much. If you watch some of my stuff, you know that I'd say it's a chronic issue right now that people are just eating way too high percentage of calories and fat, way too high sodium foods in general. And this guy wants to kind of debunk the whole thing and make it seem like it's a scam, which I guess we're going to find out more about right here.
After all, it's so simple. Salt raises your blood pressure because sodium attracts water, so if you have more sodium in the bloodstream, it's going to bring in more
Yes,
water and increase the blood pressure. But if it's
over
that
time,
simple, then my blood pressure should raise dramatically, or I might even have a seizure. If
not
I
necessarily. I'd say it doesn't hit as fast as eating a high fat meal does. A high fat meal will do, you know, serious damage, as I've seen, to your cardiovascular system almost immediately. But I don't think salt does. I think if you're in good shape, a good healthy balance, your body will do what it can to fight it off for quite some time.
12 times the daily limit of salt in one day, 60 grams.
Okay, he's saying 60 grams of salt is 12 times the daily limit. Let's do the math on that. If it's table salt, it's probably about 50% sodium, so that's 30 grams, which is 30,000 milligrams, divided by, let's say, 10 is 3,000 milligrams. So that's the limit, about 3,000 milligrams a day, because I've heard it's about 1 to 1, which is 1,500, which is the max. And the reality is, more recent information that's not counting blood pressure, it's actually counting what builds up in your body over time, which harms your health and blocks your body from healing. It says 750 milligrams, which means zero added sodium, like we say in our healthy vegan food standard. 6 pillars at healthyveganfood.info. Learn more information there.
So that's exactly what I did.
I put this 60 grams of salt in about 5 liters of water and drank it throughout the day while checking my blood pressure. By the way, definitely do not try this at home. People have died from consuming
Yeah.
less than 60 grams of salt.
Okay. Let me just also tell you, I did a video recently where I said to AI, I said, well, I know the sodium or added salt is bad for you. How much do you need to eat at one sitting to kill yourself? Because he's said here that people have died from eating this. That's a lot. 60 grams, that's 30,000 milligrams of sodium, but over the course of a day, which is 24 hours. I asked AI, how much would you have to eat in one sitting to kill yourself? If someone's really sensitive, turns out 10,000 milligrams, which is a third of what he ate, but you'd have to eat it all at one time. If you're an average person, 20,000 milligrams, which is still less than he ate, but all at one time. And for sure, eating 30,000 milligrams, which he had there, would kill you if you just ate it all at once. So he's even saying right up front that this stuff is dangerous. This stuff is toxic. The question is, if you're in good health, like he seems to be in pretty good health, what will your body do? How will it react? That's what he's getting here. He's not addressing long-term issues like we talked about, how your body will do everything it can to hold on to excess sodium in the muscles and the bones and in your back, your spine. And this will cause back pain, actually, and all kinds of other issues. And of course, for me, it just dries my lips out. My lips are still dried out from a high sodium pizza that I had on Sunday, and it's Thursday. Okay. And I started feeling reactions like the next day. It didn't happen instantly, like he's saying, but if I was to continue to eat pizzas, I would go into this terrible, downward spiral and negative feedback loop. And, he doesn't get into that here, but I just want to let you know about that too, because there's more to it than what he's just saying in this video.
All at once. I lived because I drink it slowly over a day. I checked my blood pressure 5 times throughout the day while eating tons of salt, around 10 to 15 grams between each blood pressure check. Remember,
Now he's making it sound like
the WHO's limit for salt for an entire day is only 5 grams.
5 grams limit, that's 5,000 milligrams. So he's eating 30,000 milligrams. Remember, salt, table salt, and sodium are two different things.
Americans eat almost 3 to 4 times the recommended daily amount of salt.
I finished a total of 63.5 grams of salt by 10 p.m. My blood pressure started out at 114/66 and ended up at 113/61.
So he's trying to say that because his blood pressure didn't change, and I don't know what else he ate during the day. He doesn't say. He may have had nothing else to eat. I don't know. I don't know what else he did. Just as only one metric of what someone's health is. But even still, just because your blood pressure didn't change when you had a metered amount of added sodium over the course of an entire day does not conclude that salt does not harm human health. That would be an error to conclude that.
Before I went to bed. So weirdly enough, there was a mild drop in my blood pressure. My blood pressure remained in the ideal range the whole time. Nothing really happened. On another morning, I checked my blood pressure before and after having a Monster energy drink. Within just an hour, the Monster took my blood pressure from 108/66 all the way to 125.
That's caffeine. That has an immediate effect. But the thing is, he already said his blood pressure was good. If someone else is already, he's not in a survival mode normally. Most people are in a survival mode. If you do one extra thing, they're going to get pushed over the edge. If you're in a thrive mode, that's the benefit of being in a thrive mode. You can handle the occasional mishap like this.
Over 71.
A warning about those popular energy drinks.
Researchers discovered those who drank the drinks had elevated blood pressure.
So I could get a significant rise in my blood pressure with just a single can of Monster in just an hour, but not even entirely.
Of course. Why would anyone drink coffee or tea if they didn't get that burst of energy and spike from the caffeine? I mean, I don't think anybody ever said that you're going to get a spike in energy from eating added salt. In fact, if anything, it's the opposite.
Higher salt shaker rose my blood pressure. So what's going on here?
Well, actually, another caveat is that if you're a long-distance runner, they take salt pills because you hold on to water. That's what you do. And so you get dehydrated, but your body holds on to more water. That's another part of the equation that he's not discussing here.
Decided to do this experiment was because after asking some questions about salt, I learned that the idea that we need to cut down on salt intake to be healthy is a total scam. Let's rewind.
That's not true.
The year is 1977, a big year for America. Jimmy Carter became president, Star Wars came out, Elvis died, Sugar Ray Leonard made his professional debut, the first professional Apple computer came out, the CIA revealed its involvement in mind control experiments, and people were wearing bell-bottoms and had fluffy hair.
Be a pepper, drink Dr. Pepper.
That year is when the famous dietary goals for the United States were being crafted by George McGovern, which would tell Americans to cut salt and saturated fat. There was actually
Which is good advice.
Plenty of opposition to these dietary guidelines at the time.
I have pleaded in my report and will plead again orally here for more research on the problem before we make announcements to the American public.
Nonetheless, the famous food pyramid would be rolled out to Americans not just
The big controversy is that it contains animal products and other things that are not good for you, which are high in fat.
This is a guide for what to eat, but it would dictate what would be served to kids in school, people in the hospital, people in the armed forces, and so on. So what about salt? Well, the 1977 report included the recommendation to limit salt to just 5 grams per day, the same amount that the WHO still recommends today. But what was this recommendation based on?
That's enormously high. I can tell you that, being a person that's very sensitive and watching my health and knowing when I'm doing better overall and when I'm not, and someone who has basically healed from back pain, and all this back pain information only came out about a year ago, how the consumption of added salt and your body's attempts to hold on to it is what creates all these long-term, keep in mind, long-term chronic health problems in people that have been doing this forever. This guy, keep in mind, he seems to be in a very good balanced state of health right now, so he can absorb an impact like this.
Well, let me remind you that while we're not often taught much about salt other than it raises blood pressure and that you should eat less of it, we actually really need salt. A March 1940 paper describes the case.
I agree, but he's again twisting the facts, because all whole plants, and we advocate eating the 6 pillars of healthy vegan food. Learn more at healthyveganfood.info. All whole plants contain sodium. The only way to get the amount that's not going to harm you long term, which is about 750 milligrams a day, way less than the 5,000 that we're talking about here, is to only eat whole plants, because they have the right balance of sodium, water, fiber, and all the nutrition.
Case of a child who, starting from 11 months, had a very unusual craving for salt. The toddler would throw up almost everything except for mother's milk. At the advice of a doctor, the parents tried giving the child crackers. He threw those up too, but soon he started licking all the salt off of the crackers and then would ask for more. Once the boy figured out what was in the salt shaker, the mother said he refused to eat anything unless the salt shaker was also on the table. He ate plain salt by dipping his finger into it and bringing it to his mouth. It was estimated that the toddler was eating an extra teaspoon teaspoon of plain table salt each day, in addition to his foods already being saltier than his parents. Based on weight, the adult equivalent of that would be around 20 to 30 grams of extra salt.
So I know it's addicting. I know that humans have had salt forever. And why? Because in the past, we could not use transportation systems to deliver fresh or frozen foods to us. There was no refrigeration, there was no freezing. The only way to really preserve something is by turning it into alcohol, fermenting it, or adding salt to preserve. So we as a human species became addicted to it. There's no question about that. The question is, do we need to eat that now in 2025? And I'm not talking about just blood pressure. I'm talking about all kinds of chronic health issues that he's not even getting into here.
Per day. Later, the boy's weird behavior made complete sense because his body was urging him what it needed to get. The parents became very worried about his condition and admitted him to the hospital at age 3. Unfortunately, after only 7 days on the hospital's low-salt diet, he suddenly died. In the paper, they specifically wrote that it would seem that this boy, by increasing his salt intake, kept himself alive for...
Okay, I don't know about that. Let me also say that there's one caveat to the sodium intake, and that is if you sweat a lot. If you're sweating a lot, you will emit and leach out of your body the sodium that you have. So in order to maintain that balance, if you're sweating a lot, which almost nobody does, everybody wants to sit around all day. It seems like nowadays that's the goal, or drive their vehicle right up to the front door. They don't want to have to walk at all. So they're not sweating. But if you're an athlete, yeah, that's why long distance runners take these sodium pills. And they probably don't see any negative health effects because they're running 20, 30, 40 miles at a time. Are you doing that?
For 2.5 years. The boy had Addison's disease, a disease that makes you excrete tons of sodium. So salt has always been vital for life, but the idea that salt causes high blood pressure...
But the idea that this child with Addison's disease is even close to normal is also something that you should not base a decision on. I just did another reaction video where we're talking about fat and why someone would gain weight and eat a lot of fat. And he did bring up a genetic condition, which exists, where someone will just keep eating and eating and eating, and they'll blow up like a hot air balloon. It won't even be able to fit through the door. And that's genetic, and that affects almost nobody. That's what he said. You can't base, his advice was totally the opposite of that, but that's what this guy's doing. He's cherry picking these ridiculous extreme cases that almost never happen.
Gained popularity thanks to Dr. Lewis Dahl. Dahl found some data suggesting that populations who ate more salt seemed to have more hypertension, and then he began studying the effects of high salt diets in rodents. Now, not only were the rats in Dahl's experiments not humans, they were a special type of rat. In 1963, Dahl fed rats a high salt diet and found that some, but not all, developed high blood pressure. He then selectively bred the rats to create a strain of rats that were genetically extra sensitive to salt. Later, in 1970, he fed the salt-sensitive rats commercial baby food, and about half of the salt-sensitive rats died. He assumed that the high salt content of the baby food was what killed the rats. After his study was published, the US Senate issued a mandate for lowering salt in baby.
I always tell people, you know what do you do when you assume? You make an ass out of you and me. So many people assume so many things about food, their health, without doing complete research. But it's easier than ever thanks to, you know, the LLMs like ChatGPT and Grok.
Foods. In his book, The Salt Fix, Dr. James DiNicolantonio says that there wasn't even a single study investigating whether salt causes hypertension in humans until 1983, 6 years after they crafted the low-salt dietary guidelines for Americans. He also pointed out that Lewis Dahl didn't mention what the human...
He's also forgetting the fact that the reason why restaurants and food producers, canners, manufacturers, processed food people, animal products, meats, add salt to all their stuff. One of the reasons in 2025 is because people buy more, people eat more, they love the taste. They are addicted to salt because of the way humans have evolved. Not because we need it, it's because in the past, there probably were people that were severely deficient in it. They couldn't even get enough plants, you know, but not anymore. And people are using this against you.
Equivalent dose of salt would be in his rodent studies. Jordan Filkall explained that the human equivalent dose necessary to give the salt-sensitive rats high blood pressure in Lewis Dahl's experiments was 40 grams. That is 4.7 times what the average of modern American actually eats today, 8.5 grams per day. Remember, this is in the salt-sensitive rats.
I don't think so. I don't think this guy is, I don't think the average person is honest with the amount of salt and sodium that's actually in the food that they're actually eating. I do believe if people really took a real accurate and honest and truthful log of their food, you'd see it'd probably be around that number that he just said as the theoretical maximum that won't raise your blood pressure.
In fact, the human equivalent of what the salt-resistant rats were eating was way higher than my salt shaker of salt in a day experiment, which was 60 grams. The salt-resistant rats could eat the human equivalent of 100 grams of salt a day and still not get high blood pressure. So again, the 1977 report told us to limit our salt intake to just 5 grams a day. But
And I do believe that everyone's different. All life forms are a little bit different in the way that we are. We're all unique. And even among the same species, humans, I'm very sensitive, others are not. But the proof is in whether they express any disease or not. And that is what he has not brought up here yet, because we only care about results. And I haven't really heard any other than he's saying, well, on this one day, eating extra sodium didn't do anything to me.
But there wasn't a single study investigating whether salt causes hypertension in humans until 1983. Let's rewind. We're back in the 1500s. Christopher Columbus was arrested, Magellan went on a big trip, Michelangelo's David and Sistine Chapel were completed, Copernicus said the sun was the center of the universe, and refrigerators didn't exist. So people preserved their food with salt. This meant that salt intake in particular regions of Europe was very high, around 40 to 100 grams, almost 2 salt.
But were these people watching shows or doom scrolling on their device in their lazy boy or their car? No, they were actually out there working, doing real work, excreting sodium through sweat. Keep that in mind.
Shakers worth. They ate plenty of salty foods like salted fish. Then if you fast forward to the early 1800s until World War II, Western societies consumed 3 times the WHO's recommended limit of sodium, between 15 and 17 grams of salt per day, based on military.
Also, remember that people didn't live that long during these times. They didn't live that long, and they were actually getting out and doing stuff. So right now, we have a much higher expectation of what a long life is, and we don't want to be sick, and we don't want to move. That's another problem. We really should move. It's a good thing.
Archives data. Yet,
oh, and by the way, I am standing up. I'm not sitting down like that guy.
Widespread high blood pressure is a totally recent phenomenon. So how exactly did the 1977 committee arrive at this specific number, 5 grams of salt per day? Well, 2 people out of Louisiana State University Medical Center advised the committee that Americans should reduce their salt intake, except their position was that high sodium in the context of low potassium could cause hypertension in people who were genetically susceptible. The committee report didn't end up mentioning anything about potassium or genetics though. They just said to cut your salt intake. As Dr. DeNicolantonio points out, there was no evidence whatsoever at the time.
Okay, like with most scientific studies, it's already bought and paid for. Pay no attention. What we care about is the results. We don't want anybody to be sick. Our goal as an organization is the eradication of non-communicable disease and the achievement of health optimization, which is a fully balanced state of health that's verified by an absence of non-communicable disease.
That 5 grams specifically is the most appropriate amount of salt for everyone. They just made that up. In fact, some experts were opposing this advice. The American Medical Association and the Committee on the Nutrition of the American Academy of Pediatrics both protested the recommendation to restrict salt intake at the time, saying that the data just does not support the recommendation. So we're supposed to reduce salt to reduce.
Also, you don't have as many sick people. Also, you don't sell as much salty food sells better. Think about that.
Reduce hypertension and prevent heart disease. Yet it wasn't finally until 1912 that heart disease was even big enough of an issue to be formally documented. And far before that, we had been preserving food with salt, meaning we had been.
It's because people didn't live long. They were dying of these kinds of things, or they were moving. Everything's a balance. When you've got all that movement in there, you can almost offset, but you can't offset a bad diet. But if you're hardly moving like now, it's like we're trying to eat the caveman diet when cave people used to go around doing stuff all day long, motion, movement, traveling, on foot. And now people ride like electric bikes and don't even get any exercise.
Eating tons of salt, several times the amount the WHO recommends today. So let's take a look at the South Korean paradox. South Koreans eat a wide variety of salty foods, with the easiest example being kimchi, cabbage and other vegetables preserved in salt and.
It's not a paradox, because my guess is he's not going to even evaluate the percentage of calories from fat that these Koreans eat. The fact that they eat way less fat than the average person in the United States probably is not even accounted for.
Spices. For many Koreans, kimchi is served at literally every meal. The average South Korean consumes around 4,000 milligrams of sodium per day, much more than the average American, and almost twice as much as the US dietary guidelines recommend. Despite this,
That average American thing is wrong, by the way. Maybe the Korean thought 4,000 is an accurate number, but I can tell you the average American is doing way worse than they think they are. And it's shown because we have the highest medical costs in the world in 2025 here, and nowhere near the top results. We're way down on the list. There's no value because the average person has such bad habits, especially the food.
according to a 2022 report out of the Harvard School of Public Health, Korea has the lowest rates of heart disease in the world. Further, despite no change in their food culture, Koreans' death rate from heart disease went down 40% from 2000 to 2009.
I wonder why. Do you think that Koreans are overweight? You see a lot of fat Koreans? And I say this because that's what's going to line your arteries, the fat. And yeah, you can be skinny and still eat a high-fat diet and get heart disease. But most of the time, it's obvious by looking at somebody. And you look at the average American, you're like, yeah, they got heart disease. You look at the average Korean, you're like, no, they don't. So this makes sense, but this has nothing to do with the sodium intake.
In fact, data from a September 2015 paper funded by the Korea Food Research Institute suggests that extra salt consumption might actually be protective against hypertension, heart disease, and stroke. The data shows that the quartile groups that consume the most sodium had the lowest rates of hypertension, coronary heart disease, and stroke. This has been dubbed the Korean paradox.
But that's Korea, where the average person is not consuming much fat. They're consuming a diet with a very low percentage of calories from fat, whereas in the US, they are consuming a diet with a very high percentage of calories from fat, and that is what creates heart disease.
How is that? Salty.
Now, tons of salt may be bad for you, but too little salt is likely much worse. So you might be curious why nothing happened when I ate that entire salt shaker of salt. Well, let's take a look at this study. In a 1979 study, they gave men with normal blood pressure more and more salt. They kept ramping up the salt until they reached as much as 87 grams of salt, about 1.5 salt shakers. This is about 15 times the amount of salt that the WHO recommends, and about 10 times what the average American.
This is when I was born, 1970, and I can remember in the 70s and 80s, I used to go to McDonald's a lot, and I used to always ask them for fries without sprinkling that salt on them, because they're already cooked in oils and stuff that probably contain sodium, but then they add all the salt. They shake it all over there, if you know what I'm talking about. And I told them always, and because I could feel it, I've got enough sodium. If you've got enough, too much is not okay. It's actually a bad thing. Too much of anything is a bad thing.
Actually consumes. What happened? Well, they just peed out almost all of the salt. They found that the more salt that they gave to the people, the more salt that they peed out.
Well, they will. You know why? Because you're eating too much. But the thing is, do you want to tax your body all the time? That's what creates disease. That's when disease is expressed, when you're creating an out of balance condition with your habits. And yeah, he's doing another short-term thing where, oh, they ate this much and they peed it out. Well, of course. You're eating too much. The body's trying to get rid of it and rebalance.
Out until they were peeing out tons of salt. The point is that most people with healthy kidneys, like myself, should be able to just excrete whatever salt is too much.
Not over time. No, that's the thing. That doesn't happen that way. If only it was just that simple. Like I've expressed a year ago, Dr. Gooby released his video where he was a spine surgeon and a neurosurgeon that did spine surgeries for people with back pain. And he said that's the number one reason is eat a mostly plant-based diet where you'll heal yourself, as opposed to never being healed even with a perfect surgery. Number 2 reason is eat a low sodium diet, which he later clarified as 750 milligrams a day. Because otherwise, you will pee it out, like he says, because your body's going to do everything it can to get rid of too much, but it'll also hold on to it. The whole time you're eating excess, that's the problem.
Too much for their body.
I should probably mention that at some point in the day, I got watery diarrhea, so
oh my gosh.
Another way the body can excrete large amounts of salt.
You spilled the salt. That's what's the matter.
The body is well equipped to deal with too much salt. In fact, biology suggests that too little salt is much worse for the body. A 2014 study in the New England Journal of Medicine proved just that. They found that based on urine samples from over 100,000 people in 17 countries, if you actually consumed the WHO's recommendation of only 2,000 milligrams of sodium, you would have a higher risk of death from heart disease than if you ate the 3,400 milligrams of sodium that
Whoa, okay, that proves nothing. In fact, 2,000 is way too high, and that doesn't mean that because you're eating less salt that you're going to have more health problems. It just means that one of the things that goes along with eating less salt for the average person in the study is that they're, I don't know, less healthy doing other things. That's all it means to me.
The average American actually eats. Funnily enough, to have the lowest risk of death from heart disease in that study, you'd have to eat about as much salt as the South Koreans, a little bit over 4,000 milligrams of sodium per day. But think about this, what does...
But they're taking the average Joe and the average Jane, which already is doing almost everything wrong, okay? This is part of the problem. In the United States, just so you know, in case you weren't aware of it, 90% of medical costs here in 2025 are the result of non-communicable diseases. Everybody is pretty much sick, especially if you're over 50 like me, but I don't have any disease.
Low heart disease risk feel like? Like throughout the day, do you walk around saying, boy, I'm really feeling low heart disease risk right now? Well, what you would feel the effects of very clearly are changes in hormones. You might think of, say, protein and vitamins having significant effects on hormones. For example, when it comes to boosting testosterone, things like vitamin D, magnesium, zinc, selenium, boron, and so on can help. Though I'll bet you don't think of salt as having a significant effect on hormones. A study in the journal Hypertension found that compared to people on a high salt diet, those on a low salt diet had twice the levels of two stress-related hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Simply put, a low-salt diet seems to be stressful for the body.
Well, that I don't know about that. It could be that the average person that takes care of themselves is a hypochondriac, okay? Where the goal is to not have any health problems, okay? So that doesn't seem to be what this guy is trying to seek at all. He's just trying to make a video to capture your attention by saying making some outrageous claim.
Just like when they are thirsty or hungry, animals and humans will go to great lengths to get enough salt. Elephants will uproot entire trees to get at the salty soil under the roots. Gorillas will chew on rotting wood to eat the salty microbes, and some animals will even drink urine for its sodium content. Though, as Mark Kurlansky points out in...
Look, I think they're all addicted. That's just the way that the body and life is designed. The problem is that people have hijacked today with easy availability of salt, so everybody wants it now all the time. The average person is getting way too much. If the animals find a source, I don't think they need it. I think that they're already getting enough in the plants because the plants have the right balance. Unless, of course, actually, maybe it could be that those animals are sweating like crazy during a certain day, and that would make sense. Maybe they need to find extra sodium, and they're doing that. But that's the one variable, remember? That's the one caveat, is going and sweating a lot. You have to rebalance. But again, this guy doesn't even mention this fact.
In his book, Salt, A World History, humans easily take the cake for capture the salt. In the book, he lays out how salt-seeking drove civilizations, built empires, and won wars. The past, Romans established every major city near a salt works, and for some time...
This is when we were in a survival phase. Now we can be in a thrive phase, and instead we're still choosing to live in the survival. Just like I said earlier about how people want to eat the cave person diet when we're not even living, we're doing work or sweating like the cave people. And he's trying to compare animals who are outside sweating in the sun. Maybe it was a really hot, maybe he's had a whole week of nonstop sun during the day and they've been sweating nonstop. So they need to replenish. These are the facts that are being left out of this video.
Roman troops were paid in salt. At the time, salt was referred to as white gold, and the word salary, salarium, comes from the word for salt. The thing is, though, that when salt is freely accessible, people across many populations tend to consistently consume between 3,000 and 4,000 milligrams of sodium per day.
Well, in the past, when it was accessible, they didn't have refrigeration or freezing or reliable transportation to transport produce. So that does make sense, but then you have to rebalance when you add all that into the equation and the fact that hardly anybody sweats anymore.
126 grams per day, Americans' consumption of sugar is roughly double that of Japan's. Yet the two countries' salt intake differs by less than a gram of salt, 0.84 grams. Despite dramatically different food cultures and significantly worse eating habits in America, America's salt intake is barely different from Japan.
I don't think that US one is accurate, like I was saying.
Japan. This suggests that your body will unconsciously motivate you to get the amount of salt it needs for proper function. The body...
It will. like the animals example he gave, but humans aren't like that. Humans get addicted to certain types of tastes on their taste buds. Their taste buds get hijacked. He's not accounting for that here.
They will certainly make you feel terrible if you don't get enough salt, but it's not like sugar where you crave more and more. A 1936 paper got people to be sodium deficient through 7 days of sweating and sodium-free diets. The paper said that the participants reported that they experienced extreme, unquenchable thirst. One participant reported that he experienced a longing for salt and often went to sleep thinking about it. With regard to mood-related symptoms, subjects reported a loss of appetite.
Well, look, he's pointing out the fact that someone has sweat out all their salt here. This is what I've been saying.
Anhedonia, difficulty concentrating, excessive fatigue, and a general sense of exhaustion. As a 17th century Chinese scientist Song Yingxing said, there are in the world 5 tastes. A man would not be unwell if he abstained for an entire year from either the hot or sweet or sour or bitter, but deprive him of salt for a fortnight, and he will be too weak to tire.
The only way you're going to deprive a person of salt is if they're not eating whole plants, if they're eating other things that don't have salt in them. So keep that in mind.
Type of chicken. In 2015, researchers out of the University of Manitoba published a review that lays out all the negative hormonal effects of low sodium diets. Low salt diets can have effects on all sorts of functions in the body, including blood sugar control, energy metabolism, heart disease risk, inflammation, and the hormones associated with kidney function. And a 2008 study published in the Journal of Physiology and Behavior found that individuals that work day to day in extremely hot environments losing copious amounts of sodium through sweating commonly complain of fatigue, headache, difficulty concentrating.
But that's not your average person. These are 2 different environments. He cannot use the same protocol and have the same expectations for 2 totally different environments. One where the average American barely sweats. That's almost all people. And then the other that he's describing now.
And sleep disturbances, symptoms which are often associated with psychological depression.
I love salt.
All this is not to say that you should force yourself to eat a bunch of salt, but the data suggests that restricting salt could do more harm than good. What this looks like is just salting your food to taste and not ignoring your cravings for salty things, but of course that doesn't mean you should eat.
Salting your food to taste means you're just like the average American, which is chronically ill. So I don't think that's a good way to go.
Garbage snacks like French fries. Now, if you're exercising a lot in the sun, going to the sauna, doing a low carb diet, fasting, or doing things that's gonna make you sweat and lose more sodium, you'll have to be more proactive about your salt intake.
Okay, let's just stop the video there. He finally is starting to zero in on that other caveat, the one caveat about sodium intake. And that's it. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I think that this is just kind of more of the rhetoric that you see out there, which is half-baked. It's sort of right in some points, but overall is wrong. And this is why the average person is chronically ill. I don't know the age of this guy, but when I was younger, I could get away with a lot more. I'm 55, so I wouldn't want to do that now. And you got to get better as you get older, and I'm sure this guy is going to hopefully do the same. But if you know the age of this guy, let me know in the comments. And if you don't subscribe, be sure to come subscribe, or I'll see you in the next video.